come to north. Istanbul, it looks like, but since Sofia was first a Catholic church, here it is still a Catholic church. And then you have another church, it's Notre Dame de Laken, where all the kings and their family are buried. We have 5 kings that are dead that are there, and the one who is living behind near the atomium. You can see here. It's a big building with it's a family living with transport. King Leopold II was one of the first.
The easy bike racks. Now the new cards developed, we will indicate the slope of the streets, so people even can maybe avoid taking a high slope and find an alternative. Next year we will also have a GPS system for bikers, so they can just go to A to B and then they can maybe have an option like I don't want slopes or I don't care about slopes.
It's old, but they are still nervous and very efficient. The only problem we have, you have to climb inside because it's high floor. It's about 1 meter above ground. The new one is only
enabling advisors, so I manage advisors. Do a lot of work on strategies.
Okay, so I'm going to speak to you at some point. What are we going to do next?
Very
Some sort of system that ties in.
South, and that all lines of Belgium go here. At your left side, or how do you say, left side, you will see a street that is recently refurbished, or it's still in works even. It's a beetje raar, soms zo'n hek. It's coming in the city. And you see there's like 4 lanes going to the left. Now we pass the canal, which is it has originally a very industrial use. You still see a lot of activities like concrete fabrication. But now, more and more, we also start using it for recreation, of course. There's a canoe club, for example. Sailing boats we can't have because they can't pass the bridges.
On the bridge, next to a railway station that proved very active at that time, that's other newest in Brussels. Behind you, you have pictures of a cartoon. It's on the building there. That cartoon is named Martin. There are many, it's also a very important metropole in Belgium. It's about 600,000 inhabitants today. At that time, most of the numbers were of the same size. Just in 1830, Belgium was a country and made Brussels its capital. And so it was at one big town.
Beautiful. Yeah, you can even see it. I think it's also typical Brussels. Every municipality has this huge town hall to show off against the neighbors. So this is the town hall of Laken, which is now it's one of the few districts that fused with Brussels, the city center. But before it was also an independent municipality. So they have this huge town hall that is now not really well done. You could walk to the
La gare de l'Ouest, ça va devenir la centenaire bleue.
Quoi?
Ouais, j'ai entraîné des cités de des cailloux. Ça, c'était un ministre, Eric André. Ils étaient tout contents. Je les soupçonne même d'avoir poussé à cette solution. Du coup, on met des cailloux. Ici, sous les... Il faudra voir.
La semaine dernière, Doshi était en train de mesurer à droite.
C'est des marches très basses. Et après ça, de hauteur. Et alors, à droite, je sais pas, j'ai pas été mesuré, mais j'aime pas non plus.
Here we are passing the...
Vous arrêtez?
It is a monument, and it's
It's a fair array. We have many fairs a year, of which cars are known. Many people that car cannot afford such many people. On a fait sur une moyenne 25 à l'heure.
there you see Antonio.
It's and there are big fairs. One of the biggest is Batibau with building construction material, but and then it creates traffic jams on the highways. But the biggest traffic jam is when the car fair is here. That's in, and then you see another ball there.
Come here.
Looking at this group on Thursday includes this area here, which is the plastery there. This space up the box around this second the park across the park down the field. I'm not going to say too much just now. It's a presentation too much that, but just you get a chance to have a look at it just now, get a feel for the place. Lock it away in your memory, because when we come back on Tuesday it's going to feel very different indeed.
Look on, you will jump on you will see a church, these little cars, because it's like the circle around St. Martin's. You also feel it here, you don't have to when you have, there you have, there you don't. This is like one of the main access from people coming from the north, for example from Antwerp. They come daily by car and then they come into the city and then they see this as the first thing of course.
One of the things that we need to look at isn't just what happens with traffic moving through it, it's whether anything around the edge is actually going to add to that sense of place, add to the likelihood of people spending quality time here rather than just rushing through the place. The PBS thing I read the other day had a great quote that said that on Phil's slides that said, how can we make this a place that people would want to spend time in rather than hurrying to get out of? And I think that's going to be the crucial thing with this space is, what is there here even today at its best that would make you spend any time in this space rather than just passing on to somewhere else? So have a wee think as you walk around.
streets and parks and squares where people can rest and enjoy the sun, read a book, and do things instead of just, well, we saw a great example yesterday together. So this wouldn't be possible without the support. On Saturday, my kids enjoyed a full day of working and Oliver was there. And I just invite you here and just
showing an example of a process of participation, and I will try to insist on some kind of a question, what means participation? There are different types of participation, I mean, about a specific place that is founded on the junction. Maybe you heard and maybe you read and maybe you know about the topic of the junction in the center of Brussels. And you see the places that I will talk about is there at the end of the junction when the train are going out of the ground and going to the south station. So it's quite a meaningful place. It's a meaningful because I represent the LESCO, which is an office. You want me to?
working on the street right now.
Institute, I would say. John Dillon and Forrest Hart, two young designers, landscape architects who won a contest, I will explain, and the evidence. So Brusk is a collective of skaters. Brussels skates, the whole culture about skating. They brought us a lot of information about the story of skating and some kind of figures. And these are all figures that you can see and that you can be confronted to. Over, but with the support of the major. And so it was a place of a lot of events. But after a while, John, the major decided to shut it out of the stadium. So also, we had to ask ourselves what could be the future of this place for a long time. Other topics of the skaters, figures that they can bring you to. So it's quite a very strong influence that you can lay on as a designer. Who decided to put himself underneath the railroad of the junction. So they were before there. And Bruselu has a strong culture of trying to bring people and offices and designers and artists to their place, and also to try to have some interaction with the whole field around their center. Where our office is only on this level, and we have other places where people can come to rehearse theater. So we are pretty much involved in cultural energy of existence since 15 years. That this place could be involved in the social dynamics of the locality of the city. Take part of this new construction of National Theatre, and also we have other located there. You have the junction going on of the ground, and there was this place, which was quite in fact a beautiful place, because there you can see the South Tower, which is the tower which is close to the South Station. So it's quite a meaningful place according to the view that you can have toward the South Station, and the South Station is quite a symbolic station because it is a cultural center. So you have all these very strong topics on the landscape, architecture, and design of public spaces. But it's a very urbanistic place. I showed you all the meaningful landscape, and also on the left you have the Sablon. Landscape architect, designer, a very nice theory, because it was quite a report that a young artist from Lacan made of the people using this place at the time before we did the drawing and the design. So it was quite a question. But then all the other designs, but we use this one, and you see there's this design being, and that was the whole explanation of the design. So So it was quite surprising, but we found that it was a design that was not the same as the other. He had his own personality, and he was and what was there really in the contest. And so we did our bunch of drawings to make sure that we understood each other. Function from the top to the bottom of the city, according to the fact you have the Sablon, Recyclar is there downstairs, and we had to take this place could be visible and seen from outside, but also could be a place where occupation that we had to take care of course, skate, of course, traffic, of course, space public, and of course the whole area, and also natural. So the process of the idea was to ask Bruce, since we are the specialists from Bruce, what do you think about this design? The jury, but they were quite. The need of the ball was a space, I would say. This circle, they didn't know exactly how to use this circle and the stroke there. So you see their face, they are quite sensitive. It can look like to work with such very strong guys and very. Maybe one of the first questions we can ask about how design can evolve. I mean, by taking care about the advice of other people, do we lose something or do we gain something by making evolving the ball? In fact, it's according to security topics because you may not have balls anymore that are not accessible from the security surface. Here needed very large slopes to make very nice figures. That's what happened to the screen because you need very strong structure to maintain a screen. That's involved while interest in the area. It's quite an unusual